This is a guy named Vincent James. He is close friends with Nick Fuentes, who is close friends with Marjorie Taylor Greene, or once was. I think they had a falling out. And who is also close friends with Kanye West. He has some deeply disturbing views on women and society, naturally. Check this clip out from late June 2022. Listen to what he had to say.
We are the Christian Taliban. This is the era of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is on the rise, and people are thirsty for it. They are hungry for this.
I'm hungry for your mom.
And we are the Christian Taliban. And we will not stop until The Handmaid's Tale is a reality. And even worse than that, to be honest. Yes, we do have to start rolling back. There was this article from The Atlantic where it's like, well, Alito is on a mission to roll back the rights of women, to roll back the past 100 years of rights that were given to women. Yes, that is what we're doing.
Yes, I know it is. That's why the article was written, because that's what's happening. The reason that he's framing it this way is because a lot of the time, far-right people like this try to play it coy and pretend that they don't actually want to do any of this stuff instead of just admitting it. But he's coming out here and just admitting it. He wants to roll back the rights of women. He wants to take Jews out of power, quote unquote. He wants to make this into a Christian theocracy, basically. He wants to turn the United States into a Christian nationalist state, effectively. Now, why are we talking about this guy in the first place? I actually got a voicemail about this exact thing, so I wanted to give this a listen, see what they had to say.
Hi, this is Sarah from Canada calling, and I'm curious of your thoughts on the increasing push on the far right to roll back women's suffrage. I know it's been a thing since I was a teenager, and I'm a...
Women's suffrage is women's right to vote, FYI. It's kind of a niche political term that most people don't hear on a day-to-day basis, so I figured I'd just mention it.
I was a teenager, and I'm about your age, because my father gave me some propaganda to that effect when I was about that age. Curious your thoughts. Anyway, hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of people that are setting out to roll back women's rights. Now, a lot of people don't even realize like how far women's rights have come and how quickly they've gotten there. Like back in the 70s and the 80s, women weren't allowed to have their own credit cards. They weren't allowed to rent their own apartments. You had to be married to a man, basically. You had to be with a man. If it wasn't your husband, then you had to live with your parents, basically, if you were a woman, just because of how society was structured. Now, women have had the right to vote for a while, I think since the 1920s or 30s, maybe, but they have not been treated as equals at all. Not for very long, at the very least. And there is most definitely a push in society right now, particularly among the far right, to roll those rights back. Now, unfortunately for Vincent James, the moral arc bends toward justice. Each generation that's born is more liberal and progressive and left-leaning than the one before it. It has always worked that way. Society moves forward. It progresses. It changes. That's how it's always been, and that's how it'll always be. As a matter of fact, a lot of the time, younger generations, as they get older, tend to move further right a little bit. That doesn't seem to be the trend with millennials, interestingly enough. As the older generation dies off, the world gets a little bit more progressive, a little bit more left-wing and accepting. That's why women didn't have the right to vote until the early 1900s. Minority groups didn't have the right to vote. There was segregation up until the 1960s, and now it's viewed as a given. Like, of course we're not going to segregate. Of course women have the right to vote, and minority groups too. Like, we're not even, like, pointing that out. We're not even questioning that. It's just a fact, and it's not going to change. Everybody felt that way about Roe v. Wade, for example. We felt like it was established, that it was here to stay, because everybody wanted it to stay. But the older generation pops their head in, the Supreme Court, they reverse it, because they wanted things to go back to the way they were before, and everybody is pissed off over it now. Older generations are losing their political influence. Younger generations are coming into their prime and taking control of the political system. Sometimes it feels helpless and hopeless. Sometimes it feels like the far right is succeeding. But remember that as time goes on, people get more and more and more progressive, and the older conservative generation slowly but surely dies off. So over time, we will succeed in making this a better place for everybody. We will. So don't worry too much about it. We'll get there. So as you can see on screen, I have the book that I'm currently reading on my Telltale Reads YouTube channel. The title is President Donald J. Trump, the Son of Man, the Christ. It's the kind of thing where you can just kind of jump in at any point. Like, each video that I produce stands independently of the rest. But there is like a linear progression from like chapter to chapter to chapter if you do want to read them in order. Well, anyway, this book was written by a guy who believes that Donald Trump is the Messiah, the second coming of Jesus. And there's some absolutely backwards reasoning involved here. But anyway, we're almost done with this book. We are on page 250 of 321. I've decided I'm going to read a new book. I've decided on the book that I'll be reading next. It is called The Tate Bible by our very own, the Tater Tot himself, Andrew Tate. It's terrible. It is so bad. I don't know if you knew this about the guy. How he made his money was through human trafficking. The things that he did to make the money that he has were illegal. The business model that he implemented is illegal, not only in the United States, but in Romania where he did this, and basically anywhere in Europe. It's against the law to traffic other human beings the way that he did. And here's where it gets really interesting. This book that he wrote describes exactly how he did it and how to do it. This is like how to incriminate yourself in criminal activity 101. That's what this book is all about. It starts out with the Tate prayer, the Tate's prayer, apparently. Our Tate, who art in Bucharest, Andrew be thy name, thy kingdom come through cam and fun. The cam thing there is a reference to how he made his money, which is through human trafficking. Online as it is on the blockchain, give us this day our daily vodka and forgive those, the munchers, for their trespasses against us. Lead us to women for temptation. And deliver unto us our dominoes, for his is the Lambo, the McLaren, and Ferrari, forever with Tristan. Amen. His brother's name is Tristan. I'm doing a full breakdown of this guy on Wednesday on my Unfiltered channel, and I'll probably eventually upload it to my main channel after editing and adding some things in. This picture in itself is just disturbing and grotesque. Anyway, yeah, just kind of glancing through like the table of contents here. He's got his dedication. He's got a chapter called The Truth About Your Ego. Do Girls Love Money? 50 Things Every Man Should Do. Laws of the Pimp Game. No joke. These are the titles of the chapters. I had a gun pulled on me. I've had a gun pulled on me too. Why? What could you possibly have to say about that in an entire chapter of your book? He acts like the world's biggest hard ass. It drives me nuts. Imagine life as a millionaire. The Tate brothers. Why you'll never be rich. The mindset you must have to achieve what you want. You know what? Before I go any further, I should probably tell you who this guy is. If you've never heard of him before, I will give you the introduction to Andrew Tate that I had to Andrew Tate. Let me show you the very first video that I ever saw of this guy. And when you watch it, bear in mind, this is not a parody. This is real. He really believes this stuff. July 2022.
If you ever see a man who's talking about food, oh, I had this amazing steak at this one restaurant. This steak is so amazing. He's broke. He's a brokey. Because if the steak was so amazing, he'd eat every day. And he'd eat every day to the point where he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. But he doesn't do that because he can't afford it. You understand? So whenever you see anyone talking about bragging about the meal they cooked or this ingredient they got or that steak they had, just do, because people do that to me all the time. And I'm just sitting there going, you're poor. Interesting. Oh, you're broke. Yes, okay. Oh, you went on your birthday and had that steak. Oh, wow. Once a year. Broke talk. Brokies. Real G's. Every day. Minor. Ain't a thing.
He calls people brokies, unironically. This is bad, dude. This is bad. So anyway, that's Andrew Tate if you were unfamiliar. That you now have the introduction that I had. You're welcome for that one. Anyway, as I was saying about his book, this isn't even a segment. I just kind of wanted to glance through it. Next chapter is The Tate Brothers, Why You'll Never Be Rich. I mean, what could he possibly say in this? Why is he so famous? Why are people latching onto this? Again, he's a human trafficker. He has no respect for women. None. They are worth nothing to him. These are his words. They are worth nothing to him. Let's just look at like 50 things every man should do. Let's just jump in anywhere. Fly first class and don't sleep. Drink a lot of champagne and eat a lot of food and watch bullshit movies. Be extra friendly to the cabin crew. Enjoy the experience for what it is. An experience. Okay, thank you. Number 17, dig a hole big enough to stand in. It's good for your upper body. It takes resolve and will, and it's a reminder of where you're going to end up. Once the hole is dug, fill it up and go live your life. It seems pointless. Number 15, get arrested. Hey, he's checked that one off the list, hasn't he? A couple nights in jail is good for you. I've accumulated about 2 weeks across different incidences. I think that might just be the perfect amount. Get a loan and refuse to pay it back. Sell or transfer your assets first, or do it just before you move country. Cash enslaves people. It's not fair. The banks are absolute criminals, and you need to get some small retribution. They'll simply print more money. F them. I don't even know what to say. Anyway, if you want to see, I did a whole segment on this on my main channel, breaking down everything, and I did a bunch of stuff on my unfiltered channel too. So just go check that out if you want to see some stuff by this guy. If you want to hear his whole worldview broken down, or you want to hear exactly what's going on with criminal charges and why I say that he's a human trafficker, check out my main channel and my unfiltered stuff.
Hey, Owen, this is RJ from California. I actually have a really quick question for you because my family on my father's side are Jehovah's Witnesses. The one thing I've never understood is I know, they don't celebrate holidays, they don't celebrate birthdays, they don't go to parties, whatever. But why is it that Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to celebrate wedding anniversaries? That was something that always puzzled me. Why is it that they're able to celebrate wedding anniversaries, but they're not allowed to do, birthdays and what have you? It always puzzled me. But, yeah, if you could just get back to me on that, I'd really appreciate it, Max. That's great work.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Really interesting question. This is actually an inconsistency that you're pointing out with Jehovah's Witnesses. So Jehovah's Witnesses are super obsessed with pagan practices, quote unquote, and they use that as the basis to basically count out any celebrations of any sort. They can always fall back on pagan practices. What is a pagan? Somebody who wasn't a Christian at one point, or a peasant, somebody who was of the lower order, the lower class back in the day, who didn't really take part in the higher practice of being a Christian. So the common folks' traditions basically is what paganism is in Jehovah's Witnesses' eyes, or the way that they define it, really. They, for example, having wreaths or trees on Christmas is a pagan practice, if you will. It's all just completely made up. It's just an excuse by Jehovah's Witnesses to not celebrate things, to separate their people from the rest of the world. Now, here's the interesting thing. Wedding rings are actually, in Jehovah's Witnesses' eyes, they would also be considered pagan practice, to wear a wedding ring or to get, engaged to somebody with a wedding ring the way that we do in society today. But they're okay with it. They don't say a word about it. That's part of Jehovah's Witness tradition. Celebrating anniversaries and getting married with the weddings that we have and giving out wedding rings and the whole 9 yards. So just out of curiosity, let's just take a quick glance at their article, Jehovah's Witnesses article on wedding rings. The article title is it proper for a Christian to wear a wedding ring? Many sincere Christians have asked this question out of a desire to avoid any custom of which God might disapprove. Oh my God, they are so wordy. Just give us an answer. Some of the questioners know that Catholic prelate John H. Newman wrote the use of temples and these dedicated to particular saints, sacerdotal vestments, the tonsure, the ring in marriage, turning to the east, images at a later date, perhaps the ecclesiastical chant, and Kyrie Ellison are all of pagan origin and sanctified by their adoption into the church. Okay. Written in 1878, apparently. While the facts prove that many of the current religious practices Newman lists definitely were adopted from pagan worship, is that true of the wedding ring? Yes. Yes, it is. Okay, so I guess the angle they're going to take with this is probably to claim that it's not pagan. They can find the most niche, weird little pagan connection in anything, but they like to completely ignore it when it's convenient. That's actually really interesting. There are conflicting ideas as to the origin of the wedding ring. Let us give a few examples. Now, I'm not interested in their examples. Wedding rings are just as linked to paganism as any of the other things that Jehovah's Witnesses refuse to celebrate because of their supposed pagan links. And you know what? Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate birthdays, not because they're linked to paganism, but because anytime a birthday takes place in the Bible, it's under questionable circumstances. Somebody loses a head, for example. If you use that line of reasoning, I mean, that is like the most nitpicky reason imaginable. But if you use that line of reasoning, you'd have to count out having a dog as a pet, too, because dogs are spoken of negatively exclusively in the Bible. Only mentions of dogs are negative in the Bible. So they find the nitpickiest of reasons to disavow something or to not do something or to ignore something or whatever. But in this one case, they're like conflicting ideas as to the origin of the wedding ring. Really, suddenly you think it's not a big deal because we can't prove it unequivocally, so whatever. Fascinating how they're okay with some things and not okay with others, and really there is no logical reasoning behind any of it. So there's your answer. It's all nonsense. It never made any sense from the very beginning. They were just looking for reasons to separate everybody else from society. That's about it. Anyway, thank you for the voicemail.
Hi, Owen. My name is Jake from Washington. I recently got out of AA because I realized the program was fostering dependence and taking over my life. I know you've criticized 12-step programs in the past, and you can do so a lot more articulately than I can, so I was wondering if you could take a minute to explain the harms of 12-step programs. Thank you. Bye.
Definitely. The 12-step program is not science-based. Never was. It was created by a church originally. And it's a valiant effort. Get people off of drugs. I love it. Drugs or alcohol. I appreciate that very much. That's fantastic. But why are we basing this off of a religious program in the first place? The 12 steps mention God a minimum of 3 different times. Like, the steps revolve around God in some way or a higher power or whatever multiple different times. Why? Why do I need that when we have science-based treatment programs that can actually help us and have been peer-reviewed and tested in focus groups and all of that stuff, and we know which thing is successful more often than not. Like, we don't need to go to a 12-step program to get clean when we know that their success rates are significantly worse than secular therapy or secular treatment programs, science-based treatment programs. We can go to those and have much better results overall. Now, aside from that, drugs and God work on the same portion of the brain. And that is probably the reason for AA and NA's moderate success anyways. It's really not that successful in the first place, but it probably owes at least part of its success to that fact that they act on the same centers of the brain. So getting super religious and really, really, really involved in Jesus and being in a congregation with a bunch of people and speaking in tongues and all of that other stuff feels very much the same as doing coke or meth, for example. So the 12 Steps program or Alcoholics Anonymous program's goal has kind of been to replace the drugs with God. And, that's fine, I guess, but we're trying not to replace the need. We're really trying to address the underlying emotional problems that led to that need in the first place. We don't need to replace it with anything, and we shouldn't be replacing it with anything. Why would we want to replace it with God when there are so many risks that come along with that? What if your faith is challenged? Suddenly you have no reason to stay clean in the first place. Suddenly you're not getting that high of being in a church surrounded with all those people and yelling and screaming about, Jesus and speaking in tongues and all that stuff. Now you're not getting that replacement drug fed into your veins. You're not getting that replacement feeling, that replacement high that took over when you walked away from drugs. And you are at an even higher risk of going back to drugs. Now, all of this could be forgivable if they had higher success rates than secular therapy, but they don't. They have significantly worse success rates than secular therapy. Why would anybody go to NA or AA when they have worse results and they're effectively replacing the drug with God? Why would anybody do that? Anyway, that's kind of my take on it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. I mean, there is an empirical answer to this. The answer is we should base our treatment programs off of science. But tell me if you disagree. What is your favorite TNG episode? Oh, man, it's been a while since I've gone through TNG. The Next Generation is what that means, by the by. For those not in the know, us Trekkies use TNG to refer to it. The Inner Light, I think is what it's called. It was where Picard was zapped by that probe, and it gave him an entire life, beginning to end. A whole experience of living on these people's planet and watching the planet be destroyed. And then he grows old, has children, and dies. And when he dies, or when he's on his deathbed, his children reveal to him that this was this alien civilization's way of preserving their species, preserving the knowledge that they had to offer. And he learned to play the flute when he was in this dream world, basically, that seemed 100% real. And when he finally died at the end of his life in this dream world that they created for him, he woke up in real life, and they pull the probe in, and they find hidden in the probe the flute that he played. Oh, that was a beautiful episode. Oh my God. Such an incredible. Here's another one where this is really my favorite, I think, where he did a mind meld with Spock's dad, Sarek, to help Sarek level out his emotions, because when Vulcans get old, their form of dementia is where they get really, really emotional and have fits of rage and crying and everything. And Picard is such a good actor, man. It's just maybe the best actor in the world. I don't say that lightly. It was an absolutely incredible performance. Oh my God, dude. The Next Generation was just such a fantastic series. I'm sorry for the non-Trekkies in the audience, but oh yes. All Good Things was great, yeah. Was that the name of it? I don't remember if that was the name of the episode where he was All Good Things. So I think there's The Inner Light and there's All Good Things. Are those the two episodes I'm talking about right now? Nerd! Yeah, thanks for the Super Chat Booster Gold. You gotta watch them if you haven't seen them. You have to watch them. This is from a time when TV wasn't really sequential. They didn't really have serial dramas as often because you never knew which episode you were popping in to watch. So they were not as common. You can binge serial dramas on Netflix, and that's why serial dramas are so popular now. So a lot of the Next Generation episodes are meant to be able to like jump in at any point and watch them, and they're like full beginning to end stories. So you can just watch those episodes if you want. You got to tiptoe non-sci-fi people into it, like starting with Galaxy Quest or something, right? Oh my God, The Next Generation is so good. And it's not just about sci-fi stuff either. The Next Generation, okay, I'd say Voyager Star Trek Voyager, you have to be a sci-fi fan for that because it all kind of revolves around sci-fi. But The Next Generation is more about politics and, like, you know, dealing with alien races and the politics of getting along with them in the event of, you know, how to communicate and work with them and stuff. And it's about, like, mystery and all kinds of stuff, dude. I loved The Next Generation. And I honestly loved Voyager, too. I didn't like any of the actors in it, really. But, Voyager I loved the premise. Being lost in the middle of nowhere was really cool. Wait, was Kevin Sorbo on Epstein's list? Was he really? Is that true? I don't know if that's true. That would be something else if it was. Holy shit. Deep Space Nine is my favorite. And it was too religious for me. I wasn't a fan. They were always talking about religion. I feel like it was too much. I did watch all the way through beginning to end, and it was good, but it was just too religious. Yeah, Voyager is really good. I don't like any of the actors, though, but it was a really good series.